over listening to me and to listen to Terry. So Terry, where do I see you? Do I even see you over here?
I'm here.
Where are you? Oh, there you are, Terry.
As soon as I talk, I probably come to the forefront. So
yeah, well, I want to thank you so much for giving us the information here, because in communities is a very important part of our communities in general. And I think that maybe you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you and head you over to the topic at hand. Here
wonderful.
We go. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I am. Oh, it says Tammy Dumas beside my name. I'm sorry, I'm on her Zoom account. That's why.
We thought you were incognito today, Terry.
I am. There you go. But I am Terry Bruce. My job title is Director of Programs within Communities. And I am going to go through, we are an organization that has 4 main programs. I recognize Jane's name from Volunteer Action Canada. We are Niagara's Volunteer Center. We have a language services program, but our main things that we're going to be talking to you about today is our 211 program and the data for the Waterloo region. So I am going to start my PowerPoint presentation, I believe, and I'm going to share my screen first, make that work out. Okay. And there we go. Can people see my screen now?
Not yet, Terry.
Okay.
Yeah. This is what we call technology.
Yeah.
Pandemic. Oh, look at me! I got my mask on.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I have to press the little button that says share.
That's it. You got it. Good.
Good thing we're recording this for posterity. That's right. So I'm going to go through this PowerPoint presentation. If we were all in person, but it would be hard with this number of people. I'm very comfortable and used to, we'll call it interruptions, questions as they come. There is space at the end for questions, but if anyone has questions going forward, could I ask maybe Nancy or Joan, could you keep an eye on the chat if someone has a question, just to let me know, and I'll pause and ask the question, or ask for the question?
Yeah, Nancy's going to do that for you, Terry.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so let us begin. So the first slide you see there is just pointing out our actual organizational name, which is In Communities. Our tagline is called Connecting with People with Services. I just find that's really important to clarify, because whenever I'm talking about 211 in the program we do, there's often kind of a question, whether it's spoken or unspoken, of what we might be taking away or what we might be duplicating in a community. And it's really important for me to convey to you that our sole purpose is to connect those individuals who cannot find the programs and services that they need to those that exist in their community. So the service we provide is just connecting people to your programs and services. And we don't need to look at my visions and values. So the 211, you'll notice that there's like a visual change here. I really like to clarify that In Communities is the organization I work for. I am the Director of Programs, which means I have overall responsibility for all of the programs. But one of those programs is 211, which is, so we're an organization that provides the 211 service across Ontario. So we're going to spend time going over the 211 service and system. I probably won't be able to see it. I was going to ask how many people have heard of 211 by raising of hands on this thing, but I probably have too many screens open to be able to see that anyway. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just clarify with you how the system works in Ontario. So anywhere in Ontario, you can get access to the 211 by telephone or online. That rollout happened in, I believe it was by the end of December, and we really snuck through. It was December 30th or 31st that we rolled out fully across all of Ontario in 2010. So it's been around for a while, and it's certainly been in the Waterloo region since, we'll say, the beginning of 2011. 211 is broken up. The 211 telephone service is provided by 6 different regional partners, and this visual kind of helps you see how the province is broken up. The large blue section is our 211 North, and although it is very large geographically, it does not have nearly the same population as some of the other areas. That contact center is actually out of Thunder Bay. The purple towards the bottom right is our eastern section, which is responded to through our Ottawa office. The green area is our central east location, which is managed out of our Collingwood office. The yellow in the central, so clever, is called our 211 Central office, and that's out of Toronto. And although it has the smallest geographic, it has by far the largest population that it serves and the highest call volume. To the left side would be our southwest section, which is handled by the City of Windsor. And then the blue section is ours, I'll call it ours, the central south section. So Central South is managed out of our St. Catharines office, and we respond to inquiries from the Niagara, Hamilton, Halton, Waterloo, Wellington, Haldimand, Norfolk, and Brant regions. Okay. So what is 211? It seems like that would be a simple and quick answer, but it's actually, well, it is simple. 211 was created when, as an idea to be a single point of access to all of the human services programs in Ontario. So in my analogy that I give all the time, this is my dream, that one day everyone will know about 211 so that anywhere any person is ready to look for help, whether it be in the checkout line at Walmart, a person says kind of under their breath as they're paying for their cabinet, I really need help. It's so hard to even pay for groceries and utilities at the same time, that person at the checkout could say, well, let's call 211 and see if there's any resources available for you. It is accessible from anywhere, and it's really meant to be a easy to remember 3-digit number to access any of the programs and services in Ontario. The call to 211 is free. So just in contrast to dialing 411, for example, which has a cost to it, there's no charge for dialing 211, and it gives access to information and referrals to the most comprehensive database of community, social, health, and related government services in Ontario. People will also often ask us what sort of things we keep in our database, and it's so much easier to explain what we don't keep. We don't keep for-profit businesses such as, Pizza Hut or Reitman's or things like that. But we keep all of the nonprofit, the government, and social service programs. Basically everything in our database is free or low cost. We do include some for-profit organizations, but they must be meeting a need that is not being fully met by the existing nonprofits in their community. So in some communities that might be, for example, counseling services. There certainly may be available programs in the community, but if their wait lists are extensive, then we might include counselors who indicate that they would charge based on a sliding scale geared to income. So that would be how a for-profit business would get into our database. Many times people are working with a number. So let's use the example of maybe a senior couple, older adult couple who have a number of health conditions, plus they might be either in the process of or accessing subsidized housing. They've got a lot of different people to keep track of, a lot of agencies to keep track of, and sometimes that can get confusing. 211 is meant that they could call and just say, I'm working with that place that does this, but I can't remember what it's called. It's over on Main Street. We can get them that phone number. So again, it's just an easy way to access all the information that an individual might need. The database is for all of Ontario, as I mentioned. So data is captured at a community level and then shared provincially with the system. Ways you can access 211, there is the phone number, and that's what rolled out at the end of 2010. So just those 3 digits, 211. That's how you access our services. To look at the provincial database, it's available at 211ontario.ca. And just during COVID, we're very happy to see that there was financial support from the federal government to move to move 211 and make it accessible to all Canadians. And that was rolled out within 6 months, which was pretty impressive to me from the inside, seeing how that happened. And there is a website called 211.ca, but then you can again move to the province. We also can be accessible through chat, so online chat or email. We are in the process of testing, just in our Toronto office right now, text, so people could text in questions. The reason for that is the phone, I'm saying this as a person over 50, the phone a phone does not mean the same thing to all age groups. Younger people use their phone more for research and texting. They don't tend to make phone calls. So for us to remain relevant, we have to ensure that we have as many access points as possible for individuals. So as you see there, the little visual 211 equals easy. That's the idea, easy access. So the key features, this is where I'm just gonna start, I'll probably talk for a fair amount of time on this particular slide. The key features of 211 is it's targeted. And what I mean by that is that every call is driven by the inquirer. And when I say call, I'm sorry, I have to change my own language now that we have different ways of accessing the services. Inquirer, every contact is driven by the inquirer. So what that means is we don't have a call tree. We don't have if you answer yes to this, then we ask you this question and back and forth. The common parts of any call are the greeting and the closing. So the greeting that you will expect to hear is, thanks for calling 211, Terry speaking, how can I help you today? And then it's up to the caller. In the closing, we would be reviewing all of the referrals that were given, make sure that the inquirer understands their next steps, invite them to call back again. We're available anytime. But in the middle, it's always directly driven by the caller. People might call us and ask very specifically, I'll go back to pre-COVID. We don't really get this anymore right now, but pre-COVID, we might get calls like, can you tell me what time the library is open till what time the library is open till today? Or can you tell me if I need to bring ID with me when I go to X agency? So those would be information type calls. The person pretty much knows what they're looking for. They're informed. They just need a little bit of information. The other kinds of calls we get would be where individuals will call in and say, my life is just a mess right now. I lost my job. I've paid my rent this month, but I have no idea what I'm going to do next month. I'm running out of food. I have no money. And there's just this sort of building sense of panic or concern. And our staff the training that our staff gets is to help, first of all, de-escalate or calm the inquirer and help them sort of analyze their situation, assess their needs, clarify back to them what it is that we understand is their concern and their issue. Once we know we're on the right page, then we move to our database looking for referrals for that situation. We also get calls where a person might say, when we say, how can I help you today? They might just kind of go, oh, I don't even know where to start. Like, wow, they don't even know. And again, our staff are trained for asking key questions. They will ask probing questions. They will ask clarifying questions. They will help the individual better understand their situation and again, identify what the key issues are. A lot of times people call us, sadly, sort of further down in the journey. Maybe they hadn't heard about 211. They're on their 6th or 7th phone call and somebody suggests they call 211. So when they call us, they're already a little frustrated and they're not familiar with our service. So we explain what it is that we do. But then we help them recognize that they have maybe 3 or 4 key areas of concern. It is not beneficial for us to give them 30 referrals for those 4 or 5 areas. So what we would ask them to do is identify from their perspective what the most pressing need is, and then we would work with them on that one. If it's a situation where a person is, I'm going to apologize. The thoughts come into my head of different examples, and I'm just going to keep going with them just to try and flesh it out to you. But it could be that they're in a situation where maybe they're leaving an abusive situation. So they really actually do need all of the information right now. They may not have a chance to call back in a couple of days. And then we will take the time to get that information with them. Oh, pardon me. First time talking out loud today, apparently.
This happens all the time, Terry.
I'm choking on my own self here.
Why don't you take a second to have a little bit of a breather
I'm
there?
going to do that. I'm going to do that. Just a
And
moment.
I'll take over for you for just a second.
Thank you.
One of the things that Terry's talking about today when she talks about key features of 211 is this isn't something that rolls off. And when somebody asks you what 211 is, even though United Way supports it, at the very beginning of my role, I didn't always know what it was. So that's why we're grateful for your explanations on this service. You're ready to come back, Terry?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Right.
So if I go back to what connecting people to services, that's what 211 is. So any individual who is dealing with life situations and would benefit from connections to nonprofit or government social services, send them to us and we can assess the need with them. Other than targeted, it says live. That means that, and it's where we're often compared to government helplines. And we like that because we always come out looking really, really good that way, because we are a live answer, meaning you have to press 1 for English or 2 for French, but after that you get connected to a person. There's no complex call tree that you have to press 1, then 6, then 4, then 3, then 2, and go through all of that. In actual fact, one of the things that we help individuals with, often seniors, but not always, people who are having a hard time getting through to a government service because they can't navigate the phone system. That's another thing that we do to help people. Because we're constantly interacting with those government services, we sometimes know the tricks of how to get through. One prime example is Canada Revenue Agency around income tax time. We've learned some tricks, some times of day that are better to call and things like that. So we share that with callers. So it's targeted, meaning every call is directed by the individual. It's live answer. All you have to do is choose your language. And then if you choose 2 for French, you're directed directly to a French speaking agent. And it is confidential. We do not ask for identifying information when we're interacting with an inquirer. We don't say, okay, what's your name? What's your phone number? What's your source of income? What's your address? The kinds of questions we ask the person that we're trying to support are just the questions we need to ask in order to find resources for them. So the question you should be asked at every call is your postal code. That's twofold. One, it gives us an indication so we can revert back to communities where people are calling from. But the other thing is we put that into our database because we have thousands and thousands of database records in there. By entering the postal code of where the individual is, it automatically sorts for programs and services that support that postal code. It also says that all 211 phone calls are answered by certified information. Well, it doesn't say that, but I will explain. INR specialist means information and referral specialists. So although the last point is standards driven, I will mention that there is a governing body in our sector. So if you're an engineer, there's a governing body. If you're a nurse, there's a governing body. In information and referral, there's also a governing body, and it's called the Alliance of Information and Referral Systems, or AIRS. So all of our staff who respond to incoming inquiries become certified information referral specialists. There's actually a newer name. They've just rebranded it to community resource specialist. But the reason I'm telling you that is to understand that the training is extensive that our staff get. Both in understanding how to access the database and the resources. It's also training in the human services sector, understanding the different levels of government, what programs and services are supported by each level. As another tangent, we have people calling in saying, can I have the number for Service Ontario? And we ask them what they're looking for help for, and they say, I need my passport. So if we gave them Service Ontario, we wouldn't have done anything wrong, but that's not going to help them with their passport. They need Service Canada. So again, when a person calls in asking for something specific, we will still ask them questions, because our job, my team hears it from me all the time. If you give people what they asked for, you've done nothing wrong, but you're no better than Google. So your job is to clarify and assess their need to make sure that what you're giving them is the correct information for what they need. Because if we gave them the Service Ontario number, they called through, they'd say, what a waste of time 211 was. They were no help at all, right? So when you call in, you're going to be asked for the postal code. That will help. Our staff are all certified. The people who keep and maintain the data in the databases are also certified they are community resource specialists, database curators. It's a very cumbersome name. But in order to become certified, it's a combination of education and on-the-job training. So just as an example, a university degree would require 1 year of on-the-job training before you can write the certification exam. And then the staff all have to maintain that certification every 2 years through demonstrating the professional development that they have done to keep that up. All right, on to the next point there. It's multilingual. 211 is accessible in 150 languages. So all an individual needs to do, and we had a question actually from the region of Niagara, someone who worked for the region of Niagara earlier today. All an individual has to do is say their language. So if I start off saying 211, Terry speaking, how can I help you today? And they say Urdu, I would understand that we need an Urdu interpreter on the phone, and we would make that happen. So that is done through a tele-interpreter service. It takes on average about 2 minutes to get an interpreter on the line, so it doesn't delay the interaction very much at all. Some of the more unique or I'll just say unique, not highly used languages might take a little bit longer, and the more common ones, it's much faster. So what we do is we have a three-way conversation, and that allows the inquirer to speak in their first language, identify what their needs are. The interpreter tells it to us in English, and we just kind of go back in a three-way conversation until we've gotten through to the referrals. This is really helpful for people. I'm sure it's clear why it's helpful, but we often will offer up an interpreter, even if we're speaking to someone in English. If we hear a strong accent, or we're sensing that there's a challenge in interacting in English, we will offer if an interpreter would be helpful. For some people, they get annoyed with that and say, no, I'm working on my English, I'm practicing, and that's fine. We're just here to try and help them do better. But oftentimes they will be very thankful and appreciative of that, because what it means is that it's just one less step for them in translating in their own heads before they speak when they're possibly in a stressful situation. So again, 150 different languages. All they have to do is identify their language when they first reach us. The next piece is around the clock access. People, I don't know about you, but I have never had an emergency that happened Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Like, not once, not ever. It's always Friday at 8 or Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just never. So not that we're an emergency service. I'm just pointing out that life doesn't happen just Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And this is where we, again, support the agencies in the community. If your program or service is only open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, whatever it might be, but individuals are looking for that help, they may not be able to reach you. They can find us. We can tell them what your program or service does, tell them how to contact you and the timeframes that you're available. So then the next day they're able to connect. We also hear from people a lot of the times that, and it's definitely, I'm very much this person, if I'm stressed about a situation, usually I have an 18-year-old son. So in the last 5 years or so, that would be my key stressor. If I'm worrying about something for him, I can't sleep. I find myself lying there awake and I can't sleep. I can call through at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can find out a referral, find out information, get some solutions. And although that agency might not be open, at least I can go to sleep knowing that when I get up in the morning, I have a plan. I can let my mind relax a little bit about that topic. So again, 24 hours a day, every single day, doesn't matter whether it's holidays or not. And then the last point on this slide is they're standards driven. I mentioned our accrediting body. Every 211 center must go through the accreditation process as an organization as well. I'm sure many, many of you have gone through accreditation processes. Basically, it means taking the what I call the handbook of of how we're supposed to deliver service in our industry, what the standards are, and you're going to provide another equally big, if not bigger, handbook of information back demonstrating how all of your policies and procedures and training and things support those practices. There's a standard secret shopper process as well through the accreditation process, and ongoing training and interaction with that organization. Maybe I'll just pause and see if there's any questions from anyone right now.
Looks like we got a quiet group, Terry.
Well, I'm just going to assume that means I'm telling all the information. There's no questions left unanswered.
Oh, we've got a question. How do you access interpreters? Your interpreter.
Okay. The dial 211 when you reach a navigator. Just you can say, I need an interpreter in this language, or just mention the name of the language. That's all. So if it's Arabic, Urdu, Karen, well, shouldn't be French because you have that option. Italian, no, whatever. Yeah, it's just a matter of mentioning the name of the language, and then we have a cheat sheet that we can awkwardly reply back phonetically in that language, saying that it'll just be a moment while we get an interpreter on the line. But all that has to be done by an inquirer is to actually state the language, and we'll get the interpreter.
And Terry, can you just tell folks how you access the interpreters on your end of things? Where are those folks coming from?
It's a Canadian tele-interpreter service. So there's another organization that employs and has all of these people with different languages on call, and I'm not exactly sure how they're accessible, but by telephone. So we just call through to that organization, say the language we're looking for, and they connect us right by phone to that interpreter, and then we connect our caller back in.
Thanks so much. We have another question. Is there a method for the 211 system to audit organizations or groups' contact information to ensure their information is current on the 211 website?
Well, that's my next slide. So that's a perfect one. So I'll just explain where our data comes from each region. So Waterloo's community information database, you may be familiar with it. It's isearchmycommunity.ca. The data, sorry, was there a statement? Nope. Okay. The organization that did keep and maintain the data in the Waterloo region for many years was called the Social Planning Council of Cambridge and North Dumfries. Last year, no, it's going to be a year and a half. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but it was a COVID ago. Pre-COVID, their organization closed down. So the 211 system was actually able to hire and keep the database person who always had done the work in the community. And so she is still doing that work in the community. So every organization will have been reached out to from Melissa Dunbar, her name is. The only difference now is she's got an email address that says in communities. But so the information is gathered locally through the isearchmycommunity.ca. It is, Melissa will reach out to every organization at a minimum once a year. That is the standards for the AIRS accreditation. Is every program record must be updated, and it's important to know it must be updated with the agency minimum of once a year, ensuring the accuracy. So for every record in the database, it will show when it was last updated. It will also show when it was last modified. And then you won't see it, but we have access to who in the organization provided the information to us. And as I said, at a minimum of once a year, but of course, certainly this last year, trying to keep up with all the things that are changing and regularly, it's often done more often than once a year. I am going to encourage everyone to now and then at the end of this to go into, sorry, not finishing my thoughts. I just want to let you know that there's something called an update rate, meaning what percentage of the database has been updated based on the standards of minimum once a year, and we have a 98 to 99% update rate with the Waterloo database. So everything in that database has been updated with the agency within the last year. When you go to any record within the database, you'll be able to see that it has all of the contact information. Because this is a public database, it does allow for agencies or individuals who are helping their agencies helping their clients, or individuals looking for their own resources to find out everything they need to know in order to contact that agency. The information is gathered at the local level, meaning within the community. It's shared up to the provincial 211 database. And my role in the Central South is to sort of oversee and work with all the data partners in each of our communities to ensure that the data is consistent and, being handled in similar ways across those regions. So what's important for you to understand is when an individual from the Waterloo region calls, or a person from Sault Ste. Marie calling about their mom in Waterloo, if they're looking for resources in the Waterloo community, what our staff have to go from is the information in that database. So it's important for you to look at your record and identify, is it current? Is it up to date? Does it say all of the things that your organization provides? So when you're looking, if you can see that it's got 3 programs listed, but you have 6 of them, essentially we aren't aware of those other 3 programs unless we get them into our database. So I do encourage everyone to have a look at your data, see that it is current and up to date, see that it best represents what your community provides. I will let you know, however, that if you submit information to the database, it's not automatically going to be put in word for word the way you give it to us, because we have standards that we have to meet in our database. So it has to be presented in a non-fluffy way, for lack of a better word, meaning it's not going to be written as a marketing paragraph sort of thing. It's going to be factual information about what that program or service does. And there's different standards. We have to put addresses and phone numbers in certain ways consistently and things like that. But I do encourage everyone to go in and have a look and see what your database records say. When Melissa reaches out to you, no matter what community we have, we always feel like, the person who's annoying you, because every year we'll send out information, an email saying it's time for us to update again. And then we might send a reminder, and then we might call, and you might think, why are these people harassing me to get this information? So I just wanted to restate, we're doing it so that we can best help your community by getting the correct information. In the bottom line is, if we don't get information updated and correct with your organization, we're actually mandated not to demonstrate it on our database. So we would have to take it out of there, which we don't want to do. So that's why we sometimes have to do several phone calls and follow emails to make sure that we get that information.
Carrie, it's Nancy. I have a question in the chat, and
Okay.
that is, are there keywords we need to use? I'm assuming when they're updating their database for helping you on your search end, I'm guessing.
No, there is not, but that's a fantastic question. So I will explain. There is something called taxonomy, which is an indexing system for information referral. So your description of your programs and services tells us what taxonomy to apply. So for example, food banks, there is a definition of what food banks are for our purposes to index it that way. So we look at the description and see if that applies. There's also food pantries. There's also community meals. So you don't have to worry about the keywords. You put in the description of your service, and then we're able to index it appropriately, so our staff, and it shows up on database searches more effectively. Okay, we're going to move on, but any questions we can still get as we come along. Excuse me. So the main components of 211, the first one is public inquiry, and that's kind of what we've been talking about, people reaching out with phone, chat, or email. The public looking to highly professional trained specialists who assess needs and refer to the most appropriate services. This has been done through the phone number 211 since 2010-ish, but it's been done for many, many years in a lot of organizations since then. The second part is online directories. So 211 in Ontario is powered by the online directory of close to 60,000 services. Those programs and services are accessed by our INR specialists when they're supporting people who have called in to us or reached out to us for service. There's also the 211ontario.ca site, so that for people who are looking to search for any program or service in Ontario.
Better when she's dancing.
Sorry, Terry, just a second.
okay.
There seems to be some folks who are not muted right now. We can hear your conversation in the background. It would be wonderful if you could please unmute unless you have a question directly for the presentation today. Thanks so much. Just providing a little bit of background noise here. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. So for those individuals who want to self-serve, there is the online database. Again, the information is gathered at the local level in our communities and then shared up to the provincial level. There's over 150 topics that are searchable through our website. And then the next part, which I think is arguably one of the most important, is how we track the needs of our interactions. So we track every interaction, whether it's by call, email, text, or chat. We capture the needs of the callers as well as any demographics that we do capture through our assessment. The other component that we capture is unmet needs. So for every interaction, we identify where the person called from, the demographic information that we might get based on assessment. So again, we don't ask what your age is, but if I'm searching for housing for an individual, for example, the question I might say back to the individual would be, I'm seeing a number of resources here that are geared for individuals 55 and older. Would you meet that criteria? So if they say, yes, I do, then we know they're in that age range of over 55. If they say, oh, heck no, I'm 43, then I know they're exactly 43. So depending on the information we get, that's what we track. But again, we don't ask questions that we don't need in order to assess their needs. We then track the referrals we gave them and the reasons for the call. So if they're calling about housing, it would be tracked that way. If they were calling about meals, if they were calling for recreation services and programs, we keep track of that. And then the information is shared with funders and planners to ensure that dollars are invested where they're needed most. Our unmet needs tracking has resulted in changes in some of our communities. We've been brought into conversations based on the unmet needs that we've demonstrated and trends that we've seen over the years. So just to clarify though, when we track an unmet need, it's can be where there is no resource for what they're asking for. But also it's important to know that we don't judge that their want or need is reasonable. So if the question that they've asked us for is, I want a free service to get my car detailed, then we don't say, come on, that's not a realistic thing and there's not going to be anything out there. We check our database, we identify that there's nothing, and we track it that way. And then we would maybe problem solve with them on ways that they could make that happen. But it's not just when there's no resource available. We also track unmet needs if there is a program, but they don't meet the eligibility criteria, or they can't get to the program because of the hours of service. Maybe they have transportation issues. There's a program that's there that serves their community, but they can't get to it. So we do track unmet needs as well if the service they require is out of funds. So there's a lot of utility assistance programs across Ontario. But a time and date always comes where they've run out of funds and people still keep calling looking for those. So we're able to demonstrate need in a community based on those unmet needs. Whoops, went too far there. Just some overall stats from 2020. We're still developing our actual publishable report. But in 2020, from the Waterloo region, we had just under 2,000 contacts. From those, we identified that 57% of the callers were female, 32% were male, and for 10.5%, it didn't come up or we didn't ask. 66% of our callers were in that age range, which is a very large one, of 25 to 59. This is sort of an example of the total needs that we identified from those calls. It appears from here that the number one is health related. And of course, in 2020, that makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? Housing was also very high. And just to clarify, in 2020 with COVID, there were a lot of issues around homelessness, and there were a lot of protocols put in place that impacted the shelter system and people's ability to access shelter. So there were a lot of people calling, looking for what their solutions were. Any one of these we can break down into more detail as well, if anyone has a specific question. In a community, if you're working with an organization or agency and you want some specific information, you can just reach out to me and I will either be able to provide it fairly quickly over the phone or let you know how long it would take me to get that information if it's more of a detailed search.
Thanks, Terry. I do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Somebody is asking about whether or not you're going to cover how to update their listing, because when they look at it online, it's treating them like a client or offers to make a new listing. So they want to know how to update their listing actually. So are you going to cover that later, or would you like to respond to that now?
I certainly can. If I can come back to that in just a moment, I will switch out of my PowerPoint and go to the actual website.
Thanks very much.
No problem. Okay. Another component of the 211 world, and I know we're all dealing with an emergency, and we have been for the last year, but let's look at something not quite so global. Let's think of maybe it's a truck rollover on a highway, and it indicates that it's got some sort of hazardous items on it. Using that as an example, this chart really helps to clarify what 211's role can be in emergency response. So if you think of that example, a truck's rolled over on the highway. On the far right of that slide, all of the EMS and all of the emergency personnel, or not all, but the emergency personnel's responsibility is to take care of that emergency, right? They want to clean it up, they want to clarify it, and they want to clean it up as quickly as possible to get the community sort of back on track. On the far left-hand side, we have the inquiring public, people who want to know what's going on. I saw it when I drove by, and there's all kinds of questions. Now that there's social media, there's a lot less need for it, but there's still, don't kid yourself, there's a lot of individuals who do not use social media, and they call 911 basically. So a lot of times when people don't know what else to do, they call 911 to find out what's going on. So our approach to this has been to identify that whatever the situation is that's being dealt with, there's always a person who's in charge or the lead for that emergency, who's coordinating the response. What we've demonstrated to them, and I've had conversations with a lot of your emergency response people in your community as well. What we've said to them is, if you could just give the information that you want the public to have, right? So it's a tip sheet, information sheet, and then tell them to call 211 instead of you, then we can provide the information to them. We can help educate your community, and you as the emergency response people can get back to the business of solving the situation and dealing with the emergency. So now let's look at 2020. A lot of this premise has been applied across Ontario. Different communities and different levels have had different levels of response. I've seen the Premier and the Prime Minister both say, call 211 if you want information about. And it's been great, because what it does is it helps give people an awareness and understanding of where they can go to get the information that they need. Okay. I know about the question about how to update the database. Is there any other questions before we move over to that? Actually, I'm going to pretend somebody asked this question, because I realize there's something I didn't cover off. I was mentioning when we talk about interacting with an inquirer, if a person has a complex inquiry and they have a lot of things going on at once, one of the things that we can also do is offer follow-up. So when an individual has identified that out of these three issues, they really need to deal with housing first, we would give them referrals for the housing, offer to call them back in a couple of days or week, whatever works out for the inquirer, and continue moving forward on those other issues, and also to make sure that the referrals we gave them worked out. Follow-up, because we're a confidential service, follow-up is optional. An individual, when we offer to follow up, they'd have to give us a name and phone number, and they don't always want to do that. So if that's the case, then they would deny the follow-up, and we would just ask them to call back in to get help with those other questions later. The only downside for them is they'd have to start all over again, because they're not going to get the same person, and there's no record of, we don't case manage, we don't keep files on people, so they would have to start that conversation over. But if they say yes, then we would call back, we'd find out how those referrals from the first stage went, and then move on to the second and third ones, and give them the referrals again. Another thing that we can do is advocacy. So that can look a number of different ways. Advocacy could be if an individual, if we're talking to the individual, we assess their need and we identify that ABC agency or program is the right one from them. They say, oh, I already called and they said I'm not eligible. So then what we might do is have some more questions with them, look at the database record again, and we'd, if we can't find a reason that they don't appear to be eligible, we'd ask their permission to call through and have a three-way call with that agency. So what happens in that case is we're able to say, I have Jane on the phone here, and we were reviewing, and it seems from our perspective that your program would be the perfect solution for them, but they've indicated they're not eligible. What often happens, like 9 times out of 10, is the agency will identify a piece of information that the inquirer forgot to tell us, right? So there's a little piece of the puzzle that we didn't get. And that's fine, because then we go back to the inquirer and say, okay, now with this piece of information, this would be the right referral. So at least the caller understands the situation more clearly, and so do we. But another thing that happens at times is, and I think you would all agree with me, that sometimes when individuals or ourselves are not at our best, right? We're a little bit stressed or distressed or stressed out, and we don't always present in a way that invites people to help us. So it could be that although that program was the best referral, the last interaction with them, the caller was maybe didn't present in a way that got them encouraged yet. So we can sometimes work through those and encourage that agency with our support on the call to give them a shot as well, but sometimes not. And that's the piece that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget. Oh, advocacy can also be a warm transfer. So it could be that if we're talking to someone in a rural community and they don't have cell phone coverage, they have minimal cell phone coverage, and the referral that we're giving to them doesn't have a toll-free number, but it would be a long distance call for them. If they identify that they can't really call that because it's going to cost them money, then we'll warm transfer them through, so the call will be paid for by us, not them. It also might be a situation where I gave that example of a person who's looking to leave an abusive situation. Sometimes those calls can take an hour. If we're working with an individual for a full hour and work them up to a place where they're ready to look at going to an emergency shelter, it's not in their best interest. It's not in our best interest to just give them a phone number and say good luck. We might offer to call through to keep that momentum going so that they will continue forward on that path. Again, if they choose not to, if they're not ready at that moment in time, then we give them the number. Okay. So this presentation, well, the recording is going to be available, but again, I will share this with United Way if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint as well. But let's move to the question about how to update. Is everybody seeing I Search My Community? Somebody nod for me. Okay, perfect, thank you. So let's say, does anybody want to give me a specific organization or program? I'll just do it by.
Hi, Terry, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I have a broken furnace today and the repair guys are here, so I had to go answer the door. Thank you for your patience.
No worries.
You can pick a record if you'd like. I don't have a specific example. I just wanted to let people know that I have put my email and Terry's in the chat so that if people think of questions following this presentation, you can reach out to either one of us and I can either help connect you or Terry can respond, but I see you're pulling something up.
Yep, I'll just grab.
Let you do your thing.
This is who I grabbed. So you'll see this shows that the agency name, the site, and the service. This shows that this record was last modified, meaning something was updated with it on August 4th, 2020. The last full update, meaning the yearly update, was the same date and time. Okay. So if I'm looking at this, I work with that agency, I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't have anything about X. Then you go up here to suggest an update. Okay. Once you get into that, it opens up a form that lets you edit anything that exists or add anything new. It's a long form. You put in your information so that we again know who you are at the organization and the agency that that is requesting this information. It gives us permission on how to use this information, tells us whether it's a complete update or it's just a little bit of an information. And then this is just to make sure you're not a robot sort of thing. And then you submit updates, and it's as easy as that. If you're back in the database and you don't find your program or service, you don't think it's in there, then what you can do is suggest record. Okay. So instead of going into an existing record, it goes into a blank form and you put all of your information in. If you don't know what to do in all of these, put in the parts that you do know. And when Melissa receives this information, she'll be back in touch with you to clarify it and to make sure we have everything that we need in order to make sure it can go live to the 211 system. Okay. There's also contact. So if you just want to send an email to the database specialist, Melissa, you just can click on waterloo@incommunities.ca. That's another way to access it.
Okay, we have a great thank you on that in the chat from the person who asked about how to do the updates. Does anyone have any questions? Again, you can chat, you can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and jump in. We have time for this built in. So you are welcome to ask any questions that you have of Terry in the 4 minutes or so we have left in our time together. Okay, so we have a question that says, how does I Search My Community and 211 Online differ from one another?
Okay, so I Search My Community is specific. So it's a sub database of the 211 database. So this is specifically just Waterloo. The only information that would be in there is programs and services that are located in or serve the Waterloo region. 211 is the entire province. So there's something like 23 different databases across Ontario that feed into the 211 Ontario database. So 211 is the whole province. I Search My Community is local Waterloo. But the information in this one is the same that would be in the 211.
Okay, so the follow-up question is, do you have to update both?
No, that's
so,
that. Yeah. So whatever this database at the community level, every time it gets updated, actually it's once a week, the data load goes up to Ontario.
Thank you. And another question in the chat, where can I update information for Stratford and Guelph?
So you could go on that one for 211, or you can go through the PIN network, which is, let me just pull them up. I should know this one off the top of my head, and I apologize. Okay, so the URL for that one is communitylinks.sioc.ca, and that would be for Guelph. So if you wish, you can just go to 211ontario.ca, and let me see the fastest way to get. Okay, so if it's not a Waterloo area one, you can certainly go to the 211ontario.ca. If you go under working with 211 and suggest a new listing, then you can ask for something to be added there. Oh, yes, here it is. Sorry. I haven't been on this page for a little bit. So that's just another type of form that's available.
Great, thank you, Terry. I have several people saying thank you so much for the information. It's been very helpful. They have a much better understanding, and Focus for Ethnic Women specifically has said they will be promoting it on their website and directly to participants. So great information. Anybody else with questions before we wrap up for the afternoon? Okay, hearing none. Terry, do you want to add anything just before we do a quick wrap up?
I absolutely would. Every single time I do a presentation, I mention to the group that if you've not dialed 211 before, today or tomorrow, because what happens is we see a presentation, we think, oh, this is really great. And then I know how busy I am. I'm sure you're all equally or more busy. So 2 days from now, it's kind of gone out of your head. But today or tomorrow, if a thought comes to you and you're saying, I wonder if there's what the information is for, if there's a service that does this, or I wonder if instead of looking it up yourself, call 211 and ask, and then you'll understand the experience of 211. You'll be better able to help to encourage your callers, your clients to access it, because you'll understand the process and it'll help sort of reinforce to you how the service works.
Great suggestion. Thank you so much.
Nancy's about to say thank you, and so am I. And I also want to thank everybody that has joined this call today, because some of you we know and some of you don't know. I recognize a lot of names, but not everybody's. So I want to thank you so much for encouraging your colleagues and others to do just what Terry asked, call 211. You would be quite impressed, and get the word out, because this is an important piece of United Way support for our communities, and we rely on the data. So we really look forward to having more and more data. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Nancy, for a final thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Wonderful to have this information. Terry, thank you for taking the time to go into this for us. I know we've had lots of conversations about how do we get the best possible data for our community for 211, and I think you've done a great job of explaining to us how that works and the best way for us to get that information for our community. And I know everyone on the call really has a focus on how do we get more people accessing the services that we know we have so much of in our community. So this is absolutely wonderful, and it's lovely to see so many new and different faces on the call, and also to have this up-to-date information. We've recorded this session, so we will be posting it on United Way on our website and sharing it in case there were folks who were not able to participate. But thank you so much to everyone who participated, and to those of you who asked questions to dig a little deeper. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.